Recording. Welcome AI Integration Working Group weekly meeting. Today is September 3rd and I am your host Arda Güç today. Before jumping to the agenda items, is there anyone who would like to introduce themselves if they are new to this working group?
Yeah, I can do it. So hi everyone. My name is Rado. I work at Stacklog. I'm a colleague of Jakub, and I am contributing to the official registry in the last few weeks. So we had this discussion with Jakub where he shared that this might be of interest for this group. So I'm joining, and yeah, I'll give a short overview of my experience and my understanding of that project.
Thank you. Welcome, Rado.
I wanted to introduce myself. Hi, I'm Janet. I'm the SIGAPS chair. I'm also working with the community for the AI conformance, chairing the working group. And then I just want to meet everyone and see what everyone is working on for the AI integration.
Thank you.
I
Is there
think I
anyone
can
else?
go next. Yeah. So hi guys, I'm Arush. I work with usually AWS EKS, so usually with ACK for their open source projects. Yeah, happy to be here. I worked internally with some MCPs and stuff, and there's a lot of interest in like lifecycle and registry upstream. So excited to contribute.
Okay, I can go next. I forgot to introduce in the last meeting. So I'm Daniel. I'm working with Red Hat, and in this moment we are collaborating with Stacklog to make the two-live operator compliant with OpenShift so that we can use in our AI platform. Thanks for having me here. Done.
Thank you. It is nice to see you all here and collaborating and sharing ideas.
If you guys don't mind, I can also jump in.
Yes,
Hi,
of
my
course.
name is I'm Sunil Arora. I'm a software engineer at Google. Some of you might know me from Cube Builder. So I was one of the original contributors to Cube Builder and lead maintainer for Cube Builder, the SDK for building custom controllers, and in the past also worked on Kustomize and Kube Control. I am super interested in this work at Google. We have been also exploring applying AI to Kubernetes. So very recently, Kube Control AI is the most recent project that I'm also the lead maintainer for. And we have explored some of the MCP related work there as well, like exposing Kube Control as a tool. So yeah, super interested in sharing my experience there and also looking forward to collaborating on some of these projects.
Great, welcome. If there isn't anyone else, we can move on to the agenda items, I suppose. The first topic today is life cycle of MCP servers on Kubernetes. Jakub, would you want to take over?
I have 4 slides. I didn't want to monopolize the meeting by doing a death by PowerPoint or anything, but I like to keep myself grounded. So let me try sharing and confirming that you can see them. I've never shared my screen on. Oh,
me too.
I can
as
share.
A host.
But I can then point you to, or I can paste a link to the slides. You can maybe display them. I don't think I can present. It tells me that host isn't allowing multiple presenters sharing.
I think I updated the settings now. You should be able to.
Okay, so is it okay if I replace your share?
Yes, please.
All right. Okay, and it seems like I need to update settings for Zoom to allow sharing. And it also means I need to rejoin. Sorry about that. I'll be right back.
Let's wait a few minutes. Or maybe we can continue with the MCP registry topic first, and after that we return the life cycle of MCP server topic. Rado, what do you think about it?
Yeah, I don't mind. It's
Okay,
fine with me.
great.
I also have a few slides prepared because I saw Jakub's slides, so let me see if I should be able to share. Do I have the same issue as him or? Is this
Great,
working?
you can see it. Yes.
Yeah. All right, perfect. So yeah, as I said, I will share my experience with the official MCP registry. I don't know how well you know the project or if you even know the project, so I will start with the basics. As I said, I have started contributing to the project in the last maybe month or so, 2 months. And I want to say as a disclaimer that I'm not a maintainer, I'm not part of the steering committee, so these thoughts are just my understanding of the project. The direction of the project can change, so don't quote me on anything that I say. So the repository of the project is this one. It's part of the Model Context Protocol organization. That same organization also hosts the specification and other initiatives. This is supposed to be the official MCP registry. It is not a registry in the context similar to how Docker Hub is or NPM or PyPI or other registries. It's a meta registry, so the registry is storing only metadata about an MCP server. The goal is to be this central publicly hosted service where everyone can push their MCP servers there for others to discover. The clients can be other sub-registries, can be applications directly, can be, I guess, even agents if something like that is implemented. So it's supposed to be public. It is vendor neutral. It is allowing for open source MCP servers along with closed source MCP servers. So there is nothing on the license part. And it also provides support for advertising local MCP servers. So things that are packaged through NPM, PyPI, I think NuGet and Docker images, and also remote MCP servers. So if there is an endpoint that is public, you can make it discoverable through that official registry. They have support for that. What else? Yeah, it doesn't store any packages or binaries. It's just the metadata information. The output of the project is, as I said, this hosted MCP service. It is going to be a public API that everyone can use. But the other outputs of that project is the Open API spec that describes this service. So if there is another vendor or provider that wants to implement a registry, that registry can be compliant with the official registry. And all of that is built around the server.json description, which is a format that is intended to be universal or a standard that describes an MCP server. So as I said, is it remote? Is it local? What kind of arguments you can pass? What kind of environment variables you can pass? For the remote parts, you can pass headers and so forth. And yeah, that's pretty much the structure of the registry. the no-goes of the registry are, at least for now. Yeah, you have a question?
Sorry for interruption. Is there any security scanning or something? Or this
Yeah.
is just the metadata. So can we assume that there is no malicious MCP servers hosted in this registry?
The goal for the MVP is in general for the official registry is to not have a lot of curation done on it. So there will be no automatic security checks or things like that. They will have a sort of authentication checks, which is am I the author of this domain? Can I publish MCP servers under that domain? And they have currently support for DNS verification and also GitHub verification. So if you want to publish an MCP server that is coming from your repository, there is this check that can ensure that, yes, you're the owner of that repository, so you can publish an MCP server that references it. But there isn't anything around having some check on the source code, having some check on the provenance. There is something that will be added. It is in progress around the provenance. So if you publish a package on NPM, for example, you can include some metadata in the not registry, but the package.json file that if it points to that MCP server entry, then that connection can be made. But that's in progress. It should land soon, but that's the extent to which they have security checks there. Does that answer your question or?
Yes, thank you. Probably in the long term, they are planning to add more and more security layers to enhance this protection.
I think the intent is to have something that is more or less universal, but not really opinionated as I think that's the goal. That's how I understand the goal of the official registry. And then there will be other sub-registries that are built on top of that can add this kind of value on top, which is curate the list of all of the servers that are available from the official registries, do some verification on top of it, and maybe advertise this as something that is more secure. Yeah, that's my understanding, that there will be different sub-registries that can build different values on top of it.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Another no-go of the project is, even though the project hosts the code for the official service, it is not supposed to be used by other. I mean, they don't have intentions of supporting this or being used by other people running their registry based on that same code. So I don't know if I made this clear, if I was able to explain this correctly, but it's not intended to be a library or a project that someone can take and run on their own. They can do that, but there is no support around this, and that's not the goal of the project.
I think that's the biggest difference compared to Docker distribution, where distribution you could always run your own registry, whereas there's no supporter guarantees here.
Yeah. That may change in the future. It's just this is the current state. And I think this is a very good disclaimer to make, that the whole MCP space is changing so rapidly, so that can be totally different next week. So yeah, how to use it. It's going to be a public API. It can be consumed either by other sub-registries or clients as it is. The Open API spec is available. You can find it in the repository. And when can I use it? The preview date is supposed to be next week. It was supposed to be this Friday, I think, but it's probably going to be around next week. I would say that it is still experimental, so the format can change, the API spec can change. Any feedback, by the way, is welcome. So if you see something that doesn't make sense or can be improved, the community is very welcoming, and yeah, you can share it. And yeah, that's it on the overview side. I have a diagram which I copied from the README file where you can describe more or less the intentions of how you can use that registry. So you have MCP authors, the developers that are creating these servers. They publish to the official registry that metadata file, this server.json format. In that server.json format, you have references to these package registries like npm, docker, PyPI, NuGet. You can also add additional custom metadata of things that are needed for your clients. Then it is expected to have a registry that are built on top of it. So Anthropic may have a registry. I know GitHub already have a registry that they're planning to probably release soon. And similar for Microsoft. And then those are intended to be used by mostly desktop clients for now. So this is one of the items that I think can be interesting to discuss, because currently this is focusing only on the desktop clients like Cloud Code and VS Code and other IDEs, but it would be interesting to see how that can be consumed inside an environment like Kubernetes, for example.
Yeah, I think that will be interesting to chase, because I think this work group thinks the best place to run MCP servers is probably on top of Kubernetes. So yeah.
Yeah, I agree. So yeah, that's the overview that I can share. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Yeah, on the same topic, we are collaborating with StackLock in order to design Kubernetes deployment of the registry. They already have a registry that is working on the local setup, local environment using Docker. And we are designing an implementation that runs on Kubernetes, which at the moment will simply initially provide a one-to-one mapping with the existing implementation by using a config map as a data source, but we can extend the configuration of sources using other registries so that we can implement the hierarchy that Rado was showing before, or URLs or whatever. And also we can add functionalities to validate the container images and to expose servers using the REST APIs that are defined by the Anthropic upstream. There's a work in progress, and hopefully we will have a certain MVP in a short time, considering the support of Cloud Code. That's all from our side.
Thank you. Thank you, Aldo. Thank you, Daniela. This was insightful. And actually, I wasn't aware there is such a registry under the Model Context Protocol. Is there any questions or comments about this topic?
I think last week we touched about the difference between a registry and a catalog. So looking at that picture, registry is kind of open to all, and then enterprises would have their own registry, which is like a curated catalog of trusted MCP servers that you want your end users to run.
Yeah, for example, in the project that we are working on, ToolHive, we have this registry. We have a registry which is a catalog of more or less curated MCP servers, with some of them have additional provenance information. And our goal is to, I mean, we are also in the process of moving to that new format, which is the official format of describing an MCP server, and then enhancing that information with provenance information that we use Sigstore to verify.
Yeah, I think it'll be critical to have something like Sigstore to at least ensure that the right bits are being run and validated.
Yeah, we do that for our because we have a few MCP servers that we maintain, and we already do that for them. So we publish provenance information alongside the Docker images, and we ensure that on the toHive side, on the runtime side. So you can say, like, I don't want to run MCP server if it doesn't match the expected provenance information that I have in the registry for it. Which is, I know that it sounds normal, but in the MCP space, given it's such a wild west there, I think it's a good thing to have.
Yeah, I think there's a question in the chat. So I think Rita, I think what was just said was like the upstream code base is not meant to be run directly, at least in the short term. It's only going to be a hosted MCP registry.
Yeah.
So that means there are many MCP servers that are actually targeting the same topic. This can happen in this registry.
Yeah, I guess like if upstream MCP doesn't have a stance on an official code base for a registry, I expect there'll be a lot of projects trying to reinvent that. So we'll have to see how that space emerges and how if there's a unified API to pull from such registries and deploy onto Kubernetes.
I think, yeah, I would say that it's hard to expect to have a code base that is also like a de facto standard for this, but at least if we can agree on the open API spec for this,
right,
it's a good start. So,
yeah, that makes sense. I mean, if the API is defined, then implementation can be replaceable. But like since the upstream one is minimal, like people will immediately run into issues like, oh, how do I run a scanner, or do I have additional API calls to add ratings and so on? And that's where like different registries will start diverging, and what APIs can we depend on? Right?
Yeah.
I guess like if there is interest in the group, maybe Daniel, if you have something working, there could be a demo.
Yeah, maybe in one of the next sessions.
Yeah.
Unless you want to have a demo of the lifecycle server, which is already available. So toolhive already has it. But I think, Rado, correct me if I'm wrong, there are already some videos with demos on the StackLocker site, right?
Yeah, we have a YouTube channel actually that has a lot of like examples how you can use toHive with the registries and how you can run MCP servers, if that's the question. I can find the channel actually and just link it in the chat.
Yep.
Hey, is this a okay time for me to ask a question about this?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, hey, I didn't introduce myself earlier. I was in the car, but my name is Gabe Rosenhaus. I work at VMware at Broadcom. I'm really new to this space, but trying to get up to speed. And I was curious for this MCP registry thing. Are there any expectations about how clients would authenticate to the servers? Are there like standards about like expressing that the server expects this kind of client authentication or that?
Yeah, so currently it supports GitHub as an authentication, like an OIDC provider. You can do that through the CLI, but there is also support for doing that via GitHub action. So you can automate the publishing process. That's the idea.
Oh, sorry, I don't mean about publishing to the registry. I mean like the way that you express that a particular server requires its clients to authenticate to it.
That part. Oh, no. I think they should be addressed by the specification, to be honest.
I see, right. Okay, that's more about, okay, makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah. If something on the specific, if there is, I guess, an update on the specification that addresses this, there will be a change that will be reflected on the server.json format that describes the MCP server. So the registry will have to be up to date with that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think I'm following. Thank you.
So, is there any question? If not, I think we can move on to the next topic. Jakub, are you ready?
Let me see if I am smart enough now to share. Okay.
We can see it.
Perfect. So there's a couple of slides to just keep my line of thought. They are pretty high level because there is a lot of topics, and like if we wanted, we could probably make a subtopic about every one of them. So I try to just keep an overview of what's different. And the assumption that I had, like creating these slides, was that people probably tried running an MCP server locally and maybe connecting it to something like VS Code or some client. So what you would do is, I took this example from the official, one of the official Anthropic servers, is you would run UVX and then name of the MCP server. This one tells you the time. And as you can see, there's no, it's just, it's just like literally single word. There's no versioning. So you just kind of pull whatever is in that repository, run it locally. The protocol that is used to talk to the MCP server is most often STDIO. And this also implies that there is one client for one server. There is no need for authentication because you're just talking to that process that you are running yourself. And also there's no multi-tenancy. Like one server, one client, very easy. This is very different on Kubernetes. The first thing, obviously, that is different is that you run a container. Of course, it's Kubernetes, it's a container platform. And you're not connecting to the server over STDIO, over some kind of like pipe. But what you are running is a Kubernetes workload that is exposing the MCP protocol over network. So when running an MCP server in Kubernetes, this is what needs to be done. And also the expectation about what the client is meant for are most probably different. There may be one client. It's possible that you have a very special MCP server that is only meant for one agent, but I would guess most typically this would not be the case. You would have an MCP server for several clients. And also the server might need to be multi-tenant, meaning that the server might need to handle requests from different clients differently. So like a silly example might be Google Calendar MCP server. You really want to display the calendar for the user identity that is calling, not the same calendar for everyone. And also the clients can be humans or not, which has implications on how you authenticate to the MCP server. So it's kind of a different worldview, different model. If you think about how you would go about running an MCP server in Kubernetes, you could just use the existing primitives in Kubernetes, but it's not guaranteed that you can. So provided that you would have a container image of MCP server, which is not guaranteed, there are many MCP servers that don't provide container images, and provided that the MCP server supports something like Streamable HTTP or at least the deprecated SSE, you could take that container image and create a deployment and expose the deployment over some port and then talk to it. But that's probably not what you really want to do. Probably it's a better idea to have some kind of dedicated CRD and some sort of an operator that handles the CRD and helps you with the lifetime. There's a couple of advantages over that. Like you know, if you have a CRD, you can actually then make that CRD a first-class citizen in Kubernetes. You can link RBAC to it. You can also have an operator that watches over the CRD instances and helps you do things that you would probably want to do anyway. Like if you stand up the workload, the deployment, you probably want to give it some kind of service account. So you can the MCP server can have its own unique identity that can be useful for things like if you want to pull secrets into the MCP server from something like Vault, then it's good if you can identify the MCP server. Because as we said earlier, the MCP server is a workload exposed over network. You might want to have a service that is fronting the MCP server so that you can scale them better and so on. Yeah, the CRD can help you with setting up secrets, like the Vault example that I gave, or even just with Kubernetes secrets, and help expose them through whatever means the MCP server expects. And you know, domain-specific CRDs can help you express domain-specific settings. Maybe you have an MCP server that you pulled from somewhere that has many tools, like for example, the GitHub MCP server has quite a few, and you just want to filter some of them, you could express that. So if you have an MCP server running, the other thing that you found out, oh, by the way, I should have started with these kind of opinions and learnings are based on what we have found during our work on ToolHive, but I just try to keep them generic and not, you know, push our opinions, even though obviously we have some. But what we find out is that it's good to have some kind of a gateway in front of the server. The gateway can help you handle things that you need to handle in production or like production-ish environment, but you don't want to put the responsibility of doing that on the MCP server itself. It's because you don't want to make the MCP server creators understand all that and double the work and so on. Authentication and authorization are probably the most important ones. This could be topics on their own, but for authentication, you at least want to verify if the request coming from the MCP server has a token that I can verify, and is the token meant for this MCP server at all? And then for authorization, you can really go wide and wild. The MCP standard helps, but you still need to implement these things yourself, and gateway model kind of makes sense. The authorization helps you with things like, can the client call these tools? Can it even list tools or list resources, list prompts, and so on? Observability is something that you want in production environment to see what your workloads are doing. Are there too many errors? Is the latency going through the roof, and so on? Related to that is scaling. And kind of interesting topic, especially with how MCP server is MCP protocol is evolving very rapidly, is that the gateway can help you with kind of standardizing or normalizing the protocol. This can be in the future as the protocol evolves. You might want to kind of down or upscale it to whatever the clients expect. At the moment, I think very useful thing is exposing the correct transport. So a lot of these servers out there, the open source one, are just STDIO servers. That doesn't help you in Kubernetes, and using some kind of gateway fronting the MCP server, you can expose them as streaming HTTP. And finally, I kind of touched on this, the multi-tenancy. is something that is really not super well covered, I think, by the existing implementations. But if you think about the example that I gave with the Google Calendar MCP server, or even something like database MCP server, you would want different credentials and different ways for the MCP server to access its backing database backend service, depending on who the caller is, who the client is. But for a lot of the current MCP servers out there, they are kind of naively implemented in the sense that authentication is typically provided by passing an environment variable that is just global to the whole process. And for multi-tenant scenarios, what you would probably want is look at the authentication material coming to the MCP server, so probably something like OAuth token. Look at what the identity of the caller is. In case of OAuth, you can look at the subclaim or something similar, and map it to a set of privileges, and depending on who the caller is, different authentication materials, so you can make calls in isolation, depending on the clients. So this was kind of a speed run, high level overview of what I think is different from the local use, and what are the important things to tackle when running MCP servers in Kubernetes. We can dive into each of or any of those later on, and feel free to ask any questions.
Please go ahead.
Yeah, Jakub. So you mentioned something about some MCP server that you have implemented, 2Hive or something. Can you share your experience about it, what the MCP server does and what kind of tools it exposes? And I also want to know the multi-tenancy aspect, if you can speak about that.
Yeah, so that was my fault. I should have started with some sort of introduction, but what we work on, the project is called ToolHive. It's not an MCP server. We also maintain and develop a couple of MCP servers, but ToolHive is a project that lets you run MCP servers both locally, and there is also a Kubernetes operator. And a lot of the things that I talked about are based on our experiences developing ToolHive and developing, especially in this context, the Kubernetes operator. About the multi-tenancy, it's not something that we have a solution for, just because there are things that need to fall into place and priorities. Is there anything that you wanted to know in particular?
Yeah, I was mostly curious about if it will also depend the tool that is exposed in the MCP server. If it is, let's say, requires command line stuff, then it gets into the sandboxing and isolation and how you do that. So I was just curious to know a real life example how people are running a complex multi-tenancy MCP server today. So
yeah. I would even say that there are not many that do, outside the big hosted servers, like GitHub has an MCP server that they host, or I think even Shopify does. But I'm not aware of any that you could just grab off the shelf that would fulfill all these requirements on its own. Maybe someone else does and can drop a link in the comments. The basic or general concepts are those that I mentioned in the slides, like authentication material, authentication authorization, and authentication material to the backend based on who the caller is. Be the high level answer.
Thank you.
Was I next or was it Janet?
I'm not sure.
Okay. Janet, do you mind if I want to respond to Sunil and then, okay.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, all right. So I think, Sunil, like what we have done is like we have a Kubernetes MCP server that we are working on, and we were experimenting with auth flows. And one thing we got working is where like the MCP spec only talks about auth flow between the MCP host/client to the server. It doesn't say anything about how you connect to your backend API. So what we did is we set up Keycloak, which is an identity provider, and we set up the front end flow so someone can log in through OpenID to a Keycloak instance, get a token. This token is meant for the Kubernetes MCP server. Then the Kubernetes MCP server does a token exchange to get a token for the cluster it is going to communicate with. And that cluster is also configured to use the same Keycloak instance as the external OIDC provider. So that way we are able to propagate the end user identity all the way to Kubernetes. So that's one way to solve the problem, I guess. The question is whether token exchanges will scale or not. And then upstream MCP has a new proposal around client metadata ID, and they have DCR. So a lot of interesting conversations going on. So I feel the auth space is kind of open, but I think within this work group, we can have opinions on how MCP servers can authenticate with your cluster/clusters.
Okay, thanks for sharing that. Do you have the pointers to this design that you talked about, like the early experimentation?
We can write something up and maybe line up a demo in an upcoming call if that helps.
Oh, that would be good. I think the space is so new. I think so any sort of information sharing would be good. Super interested, yeah. Thanks.
Sorry, Jen, go ahead.
The question about the MCP operator, is it that, so for users to use it, do they install the operator on the cluster and then they create an MCP server CR for each of their MCP server they want to deploy?
Exactly.
And how is the authentication and maybe policy handled? Is it through secrets?
I can drop a link to the chat. But in general, in the MCP server, the MCP server CRD has a spec. One of the sections in the spec is auth-z, and there you can expose, at least in ToolHive, we use Cedar as the library for authorization. And you can, in the CRD, you can link to a Cedar policy that lets you express what a principal extracted from the token can or cannot do, like can it list tools, can it call this tool, can it call another tool, and so on.
Thanks.
So actually, as a continuation from the Murnaz's comment, we used token exchange and it worked great actually. But I'm struggling to find the correct terms in Kubernetes clusters. For example, if there isn't an external OIDC provider, what we have in Kubernetes are RBAC and bundled service account tokens. My question is more about, are you using bundled service account tokens, or there is another resource that you are relying on for authentication and authorization in ToolHive?
So specifically in ToolHive, the authorization layer works. Originally, it only worked with OIDC tokens, any form of OIDC tokens. These days, it also supports opaque auth tokens. And by the way, I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, so just correct me or ask again. But for something like machine-to-machine authentication, where you would try to authenticate as a service account. So your the calling client would be something like an agent and authenticate with a service account. The service account would contain a JOT, OIDC JOT, and that's something you can make policy decisions on.
So is that cluster, in this cluster, there is any kind of authentication mechanism other than API servers, RBAC rules?
That really depends on how you set up the authentication policy. It can either point to the authentication server in cluster and say, like, this is the JWKS endpoint, and point to the internal in-cluster endpoints, or you can point it to whatever you like even Google endpoints or Keycloak, as Brunel said.
Okay, thank you. Makes sense.
I wonder, like, a lot of folks have questions around this. Would it make sense to have like a small demo of ToolHive? What do folks think? And I'm also curious, like, what Janet has to say about the agent sandbox, and are these projects similar or different, or is there scope for an upstream project in this area?
I have a question for Jakub. Does StackLog have any plans to support agents or lifecycle management for agents?
In what way?
Well, you have an operator to manage lifecycle for MCP servers. Are you guys thinking about extending that to support AI agents? In terms of lifecycle?
Not concrete and immediate. We looked into agents as a very broadly, what could we do there, and what implications would it mean for running and supporting MCP servers? So as an example, let me know if this answers your question. We looked at how would running an agent in Kubernetes clusters specifically, what kind of implications would it have on the authentication and authorization policies? And one thing we came up with was that something like OAuth token delegation makes a lot of sense because it lets you combine the agent identity with the calling user's identity, but it really hasn't provided anything more than like a proof of concept, or being able to have informed opinions.
Are you talking about something like agent to agent, or like, I think there are a bunch of different agentic frameworks. So with MCP, we know, okay, there is one spec which is very popular. With multi-agent, I think there are several specs and several frameworks. So it's not clear how to support it. Like with MCP, yeah, you can write a CR because it matches the spec.
I mean, I think an emerging standard for agent to agent is A to A these days. So I think everything else is kind of falling behind. So again, you think about the Kubernetes. You have MCP servers, but you also have clients. Some of which could be agents running in Kubernetes. How do you support deploying them and managing the life cycle of them?
Yeah, and I think another aspect would be identity, right? Like making sure each entity in the chain has an identity for auditing.
That was great. Thank you, Jakub. Is there any Any more questions or comments?
One comment, Pranal, to your question about interest in demo. Yes, I am interested in demo. Also, the overlap with Sandbox. One thing I see where, like the credentials, once you have the credential, there would be cases where you want to make those credentials available to the Sandbox as well. If it is, let's say, making any outgoing call to any backend APIs, or so, yeah, there would be some sort of interplay, but would depend on the concrete use case.
Right. Yeah, makes sense. I think we can have some of the team that talk today line up a demo for the upcoming weeks. And I'm also curious to hear more details about the scope of Agent Sandbox, so we can figure out if there is a possibility of having like a combined upstream project, or the goals are different from the life cycling thing that Jakub was talking about.
Yeah, about the scope of the Sandbox, I don't know if Jared dropped off the call. I mean, she can speak more about it.
Yeah, I'm still here. I have the Sandbox, Agent Sandbox on the agenda if you want to talk about it.
Maybe we can start and see how far we go and then continue next week, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, sounds good. So I'll make it very quick. I don't have slides on. Let me share the link to the repo so that everyone can see it. So this is still under development and design, so feel free to chime in. The reason I want to present this is that I want to see how MCP server or any framework we're proposing in this working group can interact with the Agent Sandbox, and perhaps we can also collaborate on this. So the high level motivation of the Sandbox is not just for agent. It is an idea about maybe we need a new primitive in Kubernetes besides deployment and stateful set. And the use case are, the initial use case is for agent when they want to run LLM generated code in a safe environment. And then there are also use cases like developer environments, or run for data scientists to run Jupyter notebooks, etc. So we can, the initial idea is that we can potentially run it in a stateful set with size 1, but there are also some use cases that's not solved by stateful set alone. So the characteristics of the Sandbox we're looking for is we need some strong isolation that will require support from the container runtime. So we have runtime class in the pod that can support that. We have runtime like gvisor or Kata container that can provide isolation we want. And then we might want to be able to pause the Sandbox so that it doesn't consume much resource when you're not using it, but when you resume the work, it can immediately come back without a lot of time of waiting time. And then potentially share the memory across sandboxes. And the Sandbox also need rich identity, and you need to be able to route traffic in a smart way. So this is just a high level idea. And then we're also exploring whether we run agent and tool call in the same Sandbox pod, or each tool call creates a different Sandbox pod, but that the later way is more secure, but can impose more challenges. And yeah, that's the high level idea. Questions?
Yeah, so I think for the case of running code, right? So is the main goal, like for example, why wouldn't you run a job for code? Is it because the startup time is too high? Like, I'm wondering, why do you want a long running sandbox as opposed to ephemerally starting and getting rid of them?
It can
For
be
running AI
ephemeral.
generated code. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, it can be ephemeral for that use case, but there's also use case for the developer environment that will require some longer time for me to do my work. And then I might want to save the state of the agent and then come back to it later if I need to revisit.
So this is like a Jupyter notebook like case
Yeah.
where I am iterating on some code and I'm gonna come back and I want that environment to be restored so I can just continue where I.
Yes.
Okay.
And then we can continue the discussion. I know we only have 30 minutes. We can continue that offline or maybe in the future calls.
Thanks.
And any other questions or comments?
Is there like a minimal demo or something, Janet, or it's still too early for that?
Yeah, it's still too early. I'll share more status when we have something more concrete.
Okay.
Does starting from hibernation take instantly? This is happening, or there is some kind of a starting period?
Yeah, we want it to be instantly or almost instantly, so that it you can. So we are exploring approaches such as we either scale the pod down and then somehow restore the state later. That might take longer, or we just try to figure out how we make the pod resource consumption near zero when you are not using it. And then when there's traffic into the agent sandbox, then the controller brings all the resource back, and then the user can start using it immediately. And then there will be some challenges around scheduling in either way. But this is just exploring early ideas. We don't really have concrete code or implementation yet. So if you have feedback or requirement, or you want to add some changes to the repo, feel free to do so. And this is sponsored by CGAPS. We want to explore leveling up what CGAPS means. So in addition to traditional workloads, we want to also explore agentic applications or different AI workloads.
Yeah, I think I guess maybe we can continue next time. Like maybe we do a demo of ToolHive and then see like what kind of intersections you see of that project with this. Yeah.
Yeah, sounds good.
I think we are over our time. This was a very productive session today. I thank you, all of you. And we can end up the meeting.
Thanks.
See you next week.